people from all across the world are in Irving. And so and it was a very high performing police department when I got there.
Yes.
So it's easy to go into a place, I would imagine, to go into a place and change it if it's broken, and you can do your, you can make your changes and make it what you want it. But when you walk into a place that's very high performing already, what value can you add, or what can you do? You're already an interloper coming in from the outside, right?
Welcome. You are listening to Season 2 of the Bonafide Leaders Podcast, a podcast that exists to inspire legitimate and authentic leadership in the workplace and beyond, and I'm your host, Tim G. Williams. Now, here in Season 2, our theme is Making the Leap. You may call it leveling up, uncharted territory, or expanding your reach. It's those times in our life and our careers when we take on a new challenge. You'll discover how you can successfully navigate your own huge leaps as you hear stories from me and others. This season, I'm excited to be interviewing some exceptional leaders from a variety of fields who'll share some of the big leaps they've made. You'll get a glimpse into what's enabled both their professional and personal success. Now, a quick housekeeping note. If you're finding this podcast useful, remember to subscribe and be sure to leave a rating or review.
Welcome in to another edition of the Bonafide Leaders Podcast. I am your host, Tim G. Williams, and with me in the studio is a guy named Derick, which is a common name, but I would say that he's got an uncommon story, and I'm excited to tell you a little bit about him as we continue this theme around making a leap. So Chief Derick Miller is an accomplished policing professional, serving as the 11th Chief of Police in Irving, Texas since May 31st, 2022. And with a career spanning over 3 decades, his journey began in 1992 as a reserve police officer with the Carrollton Police Department. Through hard work and dedication, he climbed the ranks, ultimately becoming police chief in November of 2017. Now, education has always been a priority for Chief Miller. He holds a master's and a bachelor's degree in criminology and criminal justice from the University of Texas at Arlington, also known as UTA. And he's also an adjunct professor there at UTA, giving back. His desire for knowledge extends beyond academia, and he successfully completed prestigious programs such as the FBI National Academy, the PERF, or Police Executive Research Forum's Senior Management Institute of Policing, and ILEA, the Institute of Law Enforcement Administration's Management College. Additionally, he holds a Master Peace Officer Certificate from the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, also known as TCO. And his expertise is a thing that he likes to contribute to the policing community in a variety of roles, including serving as a regional director for the Texas Police Chiefs Association, as well as serving on the International Chiefs of Police Professional Standards Ethics and Image Committee, ensuring the highest standards of integrity and professionalism within the field. Most recently, Chief Miller was asked to serve on the board of directors for the International Chiefs of Police. And in his pursuit to continuously improve policing practice, Chief Miller is a founding member of The Curve, which is a distinguished group of thoughtful police chiefs and sheriffs led by Simon Sinek. Yes, the same Simon Sinek who, if you're familiar, wrote the book Start With Why and Leaders Eat Last. This collective, The Curve, aims to transform the culture of policing, fostering positive change and innovation within the law enforcement community. I am thrilled to have Chief Derick Miller here with us today on the Bonafide Leaders Podcast. Chief, how you feeling?
Somebody needs to rewrite that.
Rewrite it.
Yeah, it's too bad. We should said loving father and husband, because that seems like that's the most I do. Yeah.
So what else do you want to share with the listening audience before we kind of jump into today's topic?
Oh, that's it. All that work and all the work we've done, but really my passion is at home with the kids and the wife, and just trying to maintain the balance between all of that and home.
Yes. And we're going to get to that.
Yeah.
We're going to talk some about balance. That's actually one of the things, I call it a little bit different. I call it integration.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk some about that today, because I think that's critical. Our kids are about the same age,
right.
So, we can relate. Agenda-wise, so there's 3 things I really want us to get to today. One, of course, is the leap, right? The leaps that you've made over time, and you've made many across departments and different titles, different agencies, etc. We'll talk about the executive nature of the chief of police role. I'm not sure everyone in our listening audience, particularly a lot of my business leaders and executives, really have a sense for that. And I think it'll be helpful for you to talk about that. And then, of course, the last thing, which is where we'll start, is just giving us a little bit of context around the recent 5 or 6 years around the state of policing and how things have moved and shifted and changed. I want to go into that just a little bit. But before we do that, something I've always wanted to ask a guest live in one of these situations is, think about the guest DJ for a second.
Okay.
All right. If you got to be an interim fill in the blank, any job in the world for 1 week, where you get to do that job, have the responsibilities, the privileges, and everything that comes with it for 1 week, what would you pick? And before you answer, I'll tell you mine. Mine is, without question, an NBA basketball player. That would be, for me, my interim dream for a week of my life. How about for you?
Oh, man. That caught me off guard. I thought there wasn't supposed to be any gotcha. I was sitting there as you were thinking. I think I'd like to be the commissioner of the NFL. I think I would like to just see the craziness behind that for a week, only for a week.
Just for a week.
Yeah, the personalities of the owners and the business side of it. I'd be kind of intrigued by that.
You never know where podcasts go. Mr. Roger Goodell might decide
maybe
you want to offer that.
Maybe so. Maybe just let me be an intern.
Awesome. All right. Well, cool. So let's get to our agenda for today.
Okay.
First topic, state of policing. And this is something you and I would talk about at our board meetings, which is where we met starting in late 2021, early 2022. And I like, maybe in my brain at least, I think about it in terms of 3 phases. There's present day. There's what I would call the tumultuous post-George Floyd COVID era or period of time. And then there's the 2019 kind of pre-March 2020 when the world just shifted and changed. Could you talk to our audience a little bit about the context of policing, particularly recruiting, perception, defund the police, BLM? Just in my view, the last 5 or 6 years has been a big swing in the field. Could you just talk a little bit about what that's been like?
Man, that's deep. So I think I would probably start in the beginning, in the birth of our country. If you think about it, policing started out in England in more of a watchman, guardian type perspective. It started with community members kind of watching over one another's property. That's where sheriff come from. In England, there were shires, which amounted to counties, and then the reef was the person who minded the protection of the farms. That's how we got the shire's reef and the sheriff. And as it evolved and it came to our country in the beginning, it was the same thing, right? The mindset was protection of one another's property. And on and about the Civil War, we find is policing takes a turn in our country. Where it wasn't in the North, it was policing was tried to modernize itself, but still was kind of fraught for corruption. In the South, policing was mainly a function of slavery and to maintain plantations and order there. And so there was a break. And in fact, we talk about, if you look at the Washington Monument, the Washington Monument started pre-Civil War and then stopped and then was finished afterwards. Well, law enforcement's and then now you see there's the delineation in the bricks of the monuments. So policing is the same way. Before the war, we were on our way. And so I think around the 1860s, all the way through present day, law enforcement, and I'm really summarizing this in my view, we go through several iterations within our profession, mostly cultural, and somewhere along the way we lose our protection mindset. We get into a warrior type, us versus them, war on crime, this idea that focused on the war, and we lose, I think, our connection with people and the victim. Hence George Floyd. And the murder of George Floyd, I think, was the culmination, Michael Brown before that, which is a little bit different, but the murder of George Floyd, I think, really shook us to the core. And those of us who are minded in this protection standpoint is like, what are we doing? And I think all those things you mentioned, from defund the police to
Blue lives and black lives,
all this stuff, I think was just, people saying we're done. But I think within the profession there were those of us who are victim-centric, and our work with the curve is, what is our true purpose? If we go back to the beginning, our true purpose is to simply protect the vulnerable from harm. And
you're talking about Sir Robert Peel.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. Right? And so I guess to try to cram all that question into, I think the state of policing now are you see policing executives trying to reconnect with the community. That's why you hear all about community policing. I don't know what community policing is. I think you've heard me talk before. It's an engagement. We should be engaging the community. Back to Peelian principles. We only can consent. We can only police with the consent of the community. If the community doesn't want us, or if we just separate ourselves from the community, that's where we lose trust. So it's all about building trust. It's all about keeping our purpose as our North Star, which is a protective, vulnerable from harm. And that's the switch we need to make. Now, in the interim, there are several policing executives who have forgotten that. There are several policing executives who still think traditional policing, we talk about in our profession, what are our metrics in the business world? And I'll probably get into your other questions, but in the business world, I can see the return on investment, or I can see a gain. In our profession, our commodity is trust.
Yeah.
But how do you measure those things? And then in some communities where executives are focused on traditional matters, like how many people we put in jail, how many traffic stops we make,
how many arrests we make,
how many, response times, these very tangible things that we measure, those are the things that get done. And so if I'm measuring arrest, if I'm measuring citations, if I'm measuring these tangible things, that's going to be reflected in how I engage the community. So police chiefs need to switch that, right? We need to talk, as we get hired, as we talk to our city managers, we need to make sure that our values are congruent with how we're doing our job. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I would just say the warrior mindset versus the protection mindset is the large switch where we need to be.
Yeah, and you did answer the question. The warrior versus the guardian mindset. The work that I was doing for TI. That's how we first met. And I was talking to a number of police chiefs and mayors and city council folks and reading a lot of research. And what you've just summarized here in the last couple of minutes, I think is a great synopsis, particularly for those listeners who are less familiar with the world of policing.
Right.
And for me, I think it's a nice segue into executive, right? When you talk about police chief, again, man, I was just ignorant, right? Before I got on that board to understand what a police chief does. So for those who really don't know, can you give a scope of responsibility, whether you're in 50-person size agency, a 500 size agency, or a 5,000 size agency? What, in your view, are the chief responsibilities day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, annually for the chief of police?
Well, I'll tell you, the chief is I guess the moniker, the chief is the policymaker. He's the leader. He's she is the CEO, CFO of a very dynamic organization. Imagine, I tell this kind of story all the time. Imagine a bowling ball set atop a marble floor, and the bowling ball, you have a plank of wood, and your job is to stand on that plank of wood and balance yourself without falling out. Now, one corner of the plank is the community. And on the other side of the other opposite corner is the police department. The back corner is city management, people around the city, and then on the opposite corner is the elected officials, city council. And the prevailing winds of public sentiment, whether positive, negative, political whims coming out of either Austin or Washington, D.C., are blowing on you. And your job is to do right by all those folks, right? And I can go into that a little bit deeper, but that's where you are kind of socially. The decisions that you make always need to benefit the human-esque part of everyone, right? I need to make sure that I'm maintaining trust with our community, but if I don't maintain trust with my police officers, that's incongruent, right? If I have to make sure that city government, may want us to do certain things that we can or cannot do, I have to be able to say to them sometimes very politely, no, or we can't do that. Maybe the city management, can't give you the resources that you need. They're well intended, but how do you continue, with how you do your business? I'm a CEO, right? My police department's budget is $91 million. 89% of that is salary and benefits, which leaves me about $10 million. $3.3 million of that last year was gasoline. I run a 619 personnel police department on about $6 million a year. That's lights, that's ammunition, that's material for community engagement, whatever you think. So I have to make sure that we are spending our dollars and we're good stewards. So I have to make sure that there's a bit of business acumen that comes of being a police chief, you know.
And there's a tax component to that, right? You're
Right,
funded,
right.
by tax dollars.
Right.
And so there's a return that you owe
Right.
those who are members of that community.
Right.
And at the same time, in the business world, what we would describe what you just discussed, right? When you talk about salaries and whatnot, right? You have fixed expenses and then
Right.
you've got some variable.
Right.
Your variable's pretty small.
Right.
And so you've got to be smart about how you balance the short and long-term needs
Right.
of the department. So there's financial components, there's policy components.
Policy, yeah.
And then you described the matrix is what I like to call it when you talk about the bowling ball and all
Right.
those four corners of people who you're seeking to satisfy and build trust with.
Right. Yeah. Because you can make a decision that, for example, an officer, let's just take it down to bare metal, you could have an officer that does something that on its face to the community looks terrible. But when you get into the facts of the case, perhaps it was justified in how it was happened.
Absolutely.
Or not, vice versa. And then sometimes you can or can't share about it. You're thinking, man, if I could only just share, because I've got in the back corner in the city government, you've got legal saying, don't share. We might put ourselves in a position where we can't share.
That's right.
So those prevailing winds, you have to sometimes look at one of those people and say, I'm going to share. Because it may soften us up to a pending lawsuit, but I'm going to lose my community if I don't share the information with them.
Yeah.
And then maybe the cops are like, well, thank you for sharing, because now you can see our job. Or maybe sometimes the cops are like, well, why are we putting our business out there?
Mm-hmm.
But it's important for us to be transparent, because we know trust, right? Trust is that's our golden tick, right? We have to maintain trust.
Yeah.
And so, it's tough being a police chief. Sometimes I tell people I'm the principal of a very large high school, because you also have to be disciplinarian. You have to be, I'm also responsible for animal services. When I took this job, knew nothing about animal services. So you have to learn, and situational. People say, what kind of leader you are? You're just like, you're every type of leader, right?
Sure.
You're trying to meet people where they are.
Yeah.
And trying to support them. So it's being a police chief is very, very unique.
I completely agree. I got a chance to go to some police chief training.
Yeah.
And was in the room with 50 or 60 chiefs from across the state on one of these, and guns everywhere. That was a interesting experience. Right. But to the point, I think, from the academy, and a lot of people, maybe they've seen the movie, Police Academy way back in the day, right? Which kind of makes a mockery of Police Academy. But from the academy to chief, there's a number of steps that need to be taken to get to that level. And you're managing a significant amount of risk, responsibility. And one of the things I want to make sure that we cover is, how do you balance that stuff, all the stresses that come with the job? So I think that's a good lead into thinking about the leaps that you've made. You've been in SWAT. You've been maybe in internal affairs, right?
Yeah.
You've been on patrol.
Yeah.
You started as a reserve officer.
Right.
Then you went to full-on officer.
Mm-hmm.
You've been a sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
You've been a commander, assistant chief, chief of police for one agency, and now chief of police for another agency. So there's a number of leaps that we could certainly talk through. I want to start back to the very, very beginning. And I just want to understand the very first time, what it was like for you when you're managing a team. You got your very first team. What were you feeling? What were you thinking? What was that experience like for you?
Wow. Okay. Really, a bona fide team experience is probably a SWAT experience. When you come into law enforcement or policing, we try to change, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. You want to either be a detective, or I wanted to be on the SWAT team.
Okay.
And so I think you feel this heavy weight of dependence, right? You want to make sure that, my experience was, I had this strong desire to make sure that I didn't do wrong by my guys. I wanted to make sure that we not only were the best trained, oftentimes back then, that was a very physical idea. I think because I played football in high school and college, and then SWAT was the next natural thing to be on the team.
Yeah.
So we trained the physical skills, but I didn't want to let the guys down on the information, because if we're in the wrong place at the wrong time, no matter how good we were going to make a mistake. So you feel this sense of responsibility, and for some reason I like that. I wanted to make sure that we were doing right and taking care of our guys, and my job was to make sure we were the best that we could be. And so, my experience was making mistakes. I know I made a lot of mistakes.
You made mistakes? Oh, really?
And my leadership style was more, as you can imagine, being young and then having a mission like that. It was more of a direct style type leadership,
sure.
More of a football coach type leadership. But the relationships built through that have sustained me throughout my career. But I think that's it. My first stint was a SWAT team, and then kind of on a micro level, being a field training officer, being responsible for one person and teaching them how to be a police officer. And it was evident early on to me that I think some mistakes police departments make now, they're looking for people who are police officers and then trying to indoctrinate them in how we do work here. And I think we miss that. I think what people need to realize is we're looking for people with the right attributes, and then we can teach them how to be police officers. Right. And so I really enjoyed leading, I guess, a small team from that perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on through sergeant. Sergeant was the funnest time in my career. I was a sergeant for 12 years. Sergeant is the first line supervisor.
Okay.
And so you have 8 to 10 police officers who you're responsible for. And you are truly, making sure they're doing things right. But then you're taking care of all their problems, from home to moving to troubles in relationships to, on the dark side. Sometimes they have issues with either mental health was not a thing for us. It was one of those things that you just get through.
Well, even now, to some extent, right?
True,
There's going to be some in the field who are like, hey, I don't want to be, looked at as somebody who's weak.
Right. Yeah. So being a sergeant was really, really cool.
It was fun, huh?
Yeah.
So I'm sensing this desire to demonstrate responsibility and this care for people.
Right.
So it seems like that was something that was in you from a relatively early part of your career. Yeah.
So
okay.
I think it also drove, and I don't want to get, and I think it also drove my decisions to keep taking steps. Every step I took, it was because I was pissed off about something.
Okay.
I was mad either or frustrated with leadership above.
Yeah.
And so my mother taught me long ago, you can complain about it or you can do something about it.
Yeah.
And so every single move except for this last one was because I'm frustrated by something, and I'm gonna change it. And the way to change it is I had a college professor say, with more education comes more latitude and responsibility. And I took that. The higher you go. Now sometimes that wasn't true. You'd get to the next step, you're like, man, I can't do anything about it yet.
Yeah.
So but taking care of people, I think that's it for me.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. You talked about, wanting to solve problems.
Right.
As opposed to complaining about the problems.
Yeah.
And I had a podcast guest on a few weeks ago, and that was really their mindset through the process. And for you, it seems like that was a motivator to pursue bigger opportunities, which is what we're going to talk about next. Yeah. So one of these roles I'd like to dig into a little bit, and you've had a number of them.
Right.
So for me, I can think about like my most dynamic role ever, the scariest thing I went into, really because I didn't know what exactly I was going into. I'm curious if you think about your own career, your own move, a leap that was the most dynamic or challenging or scariest for you. Which one comes to mind?
Well, they all had components of that. Man, I think maybe the scariest one. So remember, I was an operational in policing. Just like anything else, there's operations, and then there's investigations, and then there's administration. And so I didn't want to be in investigation. I want to be on the operations side, which is why my career, the SWAT theme, all the way up to SWAT commander, was there. And so the scariest thing for me is when I was tapped on the shoulder. I mean, operational. They put me in CID and detectives for a while. Didn't like that. The Criminal Investigation Division.
Yep.
I got out of that after a couple of years. Went back to where I came from in operations. I'm an operational guy. Well, when I got the tap on the shoulder to say, you're going to admin, You need to go to administration. And not only are you going to go to administration, you're going to be responsible for training. And then I did that for several years. And then I was responsible for internal affairs. And so being an operational guy, not wanting to do investigations, wanting to be where the rubber met the road and driving fast and doing all that fun stuff that you see on TV, so we was stopped. And what was scary about that was this idea of, I don't know what I'm doing. When I was in training, I understood a little bit of training and the regulatory aspects of what it takes to maintain our licensure, but how to learn about the system we're in. And the system I was in is a civil service system. It's a system that is codified in law, and it deals with hiring and termination and how we promote, and it can be very clinical sometimes. And so having to learn that were very, very daunting to me, but it absolutely was the best thing that happened in my career.
All right.
Yeah.
So you're in operations.
Yeah.
You love that. It's like playing football, tackling somebody. It
Yeah,
feels good.
Yeah.
You're on the ground, you're driving fast, Now, even when you moved to the field training officer, this wasn't like a Denzel Washington kind of field training.
No, by no means, no.
That's the image, that sometimes comes to mind when they think of training day and that kind of field training officer. Not that kind.
Yeah.
But you like the action. You like being engaged with people. You like doing the work, if you will, right? And now they ask you to go to administration. You have to learn new skills.
Yeah.
Talk about some of the new skills that you had to begin to learn over there in administration that was different than what you had to do in operations.
Sadly, I would tell you, listening. You think that being in operation and talking to people and meeting people where they are and being with them at their worst times, you get jaded because you're just trying to get to the next call. And on the admin side, you had to truly listen and understand, the root cause, or on the opposite side, the second and third order effect of a decision being made. And so if you didn't understand the issues or the problems, either whether it be budget, whether it be an investigation that, a decision or misstep, one of the things I'm frustrated with in our profession today is I can hold a police officer accountable for misconduct up into termination, and they can be put back to work because of the system we find ourselves in. In that, if rules and procedures aren't followed, despite the fact that you fired somebody, chief, they can go to Civil Service Commission and get their job back and put them right back to work. So making sure that you're listening and understanding and comprehending how to navigate these systems was very, very important, which, like I said, built the foundation to be chief. And then the second position that's the most dynamic has been this last leap that I took from the police chief of the Carrollton Police Department. Carrollton is a police department that's got about 150 cops and about 50 civilians to, like I said earlier, I got 403 cops, another 200 civilians. The city of Irving is not to say anything about Carrollton, but it's a bit more dynamic.
Sure, there's more people.
There's more people.
Yeah, 250,000 or something like that. Your population, right in Irving.
Right, and up until several years ago, had a zip code which was the most diverse zip code in the United States.
Is that right?
Yes.
Wow.
Irving is one of the most diverse people from all across the world are in Irving, and so and it was a very high performing police department when I got there.
Yes.
So it's easy to go into a place, I would imagine, to go into a place and change it if it's broken, and you can do your, you can make your changes and make it what you want it. But when you walk into a place that's very high performing already, what value can you add, or what can you do? You're already an interloper coming in from the outside, right? in an organization that was being extremely well ran.
Yes. And you and I both know that person who formerly ran that place.
Yeah. Jeff Spivey was just what I call a celebrity chief.
You're not a celebrity chief.
No.
You don't have that yet. Okay.
Yeah, not. But yeah, and so having taken the reins of this I tell people, just imagine jumping into a very high performing car. And it's already going 200 miles an hour, and just keeping it on the track, and so it's been very, very rewarding.
Okay, so let's go back to something you talked about, which I think is very relatable for the listener. When you're a frontline worker, whether it's in police patrol or whether you're a first line attorney, you're on the ground. First line SWAT, you patrol, whatever, right? I mean, you're on the ground. You're solving that immediate problem. And maybe listening's not that important because you're just there to solve that immediate problem.
Right.
As you move up, which you did, and take on more responsibility, there's layers to this thing.
Right.
In terms of complexities that previously, we're individual contributors, we don't really have to think about.
Right.
So talk some about that, because when you peel layers back, whether it's body-worn camera issues or licensing issues or training issues, there's oftentimes multiple angles of the camera, if you will, that you're evaluating a situation. Talk about that shift as an executive.
I hope I can answer this. So I think I read a book. His name is William Bridges. It's called Managing Transitions. And it's this idea, the delineation between change and transition. It's the emotional and psychological switch one has to make as they make a transition. And change is something external that happens to you. It could be, I don't know, it could be a pandemic. It could be regulatory change. It could be a change in the market. It could be whatever. But a transition is more of a how are you coping, and the psychological, emotional thing, the switch that you have to make to respond, not react, to respond to that change.
Yeah.
And so each one in his book, he talks about the first thing you have to do is end it. You have to let the last position go. And so before, where I was very operational, and now I know I'm moving into a new position where I'm responsible. Let's take a middle manager job, a lieutenant or commander spot where I'm having more responsibility. I know how to be a sergeant, which is more operational, but I have to let that part go. And then the next part is this neutral zone that they describe, where you've let this part go, but you really don't know what the new position is yet.
That's right.
You sit there thinking, for example, at the assistant chief level, you're very close to the chief, and you think, I know I can do that guy's job.
Absolutely,
I know
right.
I can do that. I watch that dude make mistakes. I watch him have triumphs. I know I can do that job.
That's right.
And then you get it. The new beginning is the third part, where now you're in the job, and now your question is, what are those new things that you didn't realize, or what you're responsible for? So I kind of couch it like that. So at every position, I've kind of taken that to heart, that I've been really good at letting go. I've been really good at saying I'm not a sergeant anymore. My job as sergeant was to be the frontline supervisor, was to make sure people were at work when they were supposed to be at work, that they were doing their job the right way, that I'm holding them accountable, and that I'm rewarding them when they're doing well. And then you become a middle manager where, okay, now I've got 2 or 3 platoons of sergeants who have 6 to 8 people. Okay, well, I can't step on my sergeant's toes. I need to let them be the sergeant.
You could.
I could.
But what would happen with that?
I would be a micromanager, right? I'd be, and so it's just the identification of what is the role, and what are my responsibilities, and then what came later for me from a leadership standpoint is, to your point just then, is what the military calls command intent. So my responsibility is to paint the picture of the direction that we want to go, and then empower the people that we have working for us and with us to get that done. And so what does that look like? So that new beginning, understanding, okay, my job now is to facilitate, remove obstacles, hold accountable. And so I've really been blessed in kind of understanding those attributes as I move forward through my career at each position. Now, each position was hard because you don't get a promotion like I would imagine in the business world based on your performance or where you've been doing. In my line of work, it's all tested. You have to take a test. You have to interview, and someone who hasn't struggled with dyslexia my entire life, it was very, very difficult for me to test where some of my colleagues could read the material. I had to read the material. I had to scribe the material. I had to reread, scribe, and I would just barely get in on the test. But the next part was the interview, and if I could get in the interview, I could hold my own there. And so, for example, sergeant, it took me, I think, 7 times to get to test before I became a sergeant. 4 times as lieutenant, another couple times as commander. You don't get appointed to a position until you get appointed to assistant chief. So that was my first appointment, was assistant chief. So having to fight tooth and nail in this system to get promoted was yes. If you were asked what's your greatest accomplishment, one of my greatest accomplishments, other than my family or my college degree, because I didn't think I was going to get through college, is making those promotions. So, yeah.
Well, is it the promotion, or is it the grit to work through 7 times, 4 times?
Yeah.
Coming back, man. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think my mom and my father always said, one thing that you have, you're pretty determined. I'm one of those people, when I see something, I want it, and I'm put my mind to it, and it might take me a while. It took me, there was 20 years between my bachelor and my master's degree, but I wanted it. And I think that's served me well, mostly in my life, to be determined to get what I want.
Yeah.
And so it was just, I'm going to study. I'm going to have to just, you may be smarter. I may be dealing with, dyslexia, but I'm going to outwork you. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of how I've been my whole career. Yeah.
There's a lesson that I hope somebody just picked up. You said it was 20 years between the time you got your bachelor's and master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 7 times that you tested, before you could become, was it sergeant?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
For those listening who might be struggling, thinking they'll never get to the level they want to be at,
right.
I think you're a living example that with perseverance, we really can do anything.
Yeah, I appreciate that. My father always told me, son, you can do whatever you want. And he always said that, and, some people may say it's elementary, but I took that to heart, and I tell my son now, you can do whatever you want. I will never tell him he wants to play in the NFL and all this other stuff. Now you give the head tilt and eye roll about the percentages of people who get to do those things, but I will never tell him you can't do. I'll say have a plan.
Absolutely,
we need to have a plan, but what do we need to do to get you there if that's what you aspire to do?
Yeah.
And it hadn't been easy. I've had struggles socially. I've had struggles academically. I've had struggles. But I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what my North Star was. I knew what my values are, and I just kept on going.
Yeah.
So,
kudos to you for keep on pushing.
Hey, listeners, if you're busy, and I know you are, but you want to grow your leadership in an efficient and cost-effective way, I invite you to check out my on-demand digital leadership courses at bonafideleaders.com/courses. Now, you're wondering, what do I get in exchange for my purchase? Well, you'll get dynamic teaching and insights, and you'll leave with the tools and practical application you need to be a more effective and impactful leader. Wherever you lead, at work or at home, you'll become more confident in your capabilities because you'll know your unique leadership style and how to apply it. You will know how to create powerful and engaging meetings and also how to better integrate your work and life. You'll get that and much, much more. Now, if that weren't enough, with your purchase, as my gift to you, you'll also be added to the Digital Bonafide Leaders community, a real community of leaders like you for networking, best practice sharing, and you'll have direct access to me. Go to the website and you'll find a link in the show notes, and you'll get instant access today.
I want to shift, and we've talked about maybe things you're proud of.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you, for me, one of the things that I'm not happy with that I wish I could go back and do over is when I went out to California and that job we were talking before we started recording, that job I had. I wish I would have worked harder in this matrix structure with the relationship with one of my bosses. You talked about all those people who you've got to sort of pacify, please, and trust. And in those first 6 months in that role, for me, I would have worked harder to make that relationship stronger. We eventually got where we needed to be, but man, there was that gap of time where if I had a do-over, I would have done that. For you, if you think about the leaps that you've made, which one would you have handled better or differently if given the opportunity?
I think kind of like in my journey with what I just described, I had to have a hard rock candy shell around me at certain levels. I would think in my middle years when I was a lieutenant and a commander was one, and probably still am to an extent, if I can't get help from you or buy-in from you, I'll just go my own way and do my own thing. Now, it served me well a lot, but I think the wake of that attitude can be a bit harmful as well with respect to relationships. I have people who went through the academy with and I came up with in my profession who I was very close with. And I think now in hindsight, in my pursuit to get to where I thought I needed to be, not that I stepped on anyone or I don't think mistreated anyone, but I do think that I wish I would have come to listening and communicating better. The other thing I would say about myself is I wouldn't say I'm not paid. I'm one of those people that I want to get things done now. I don't want to say I'm paid. Some people who work with me will say he's not a patient guy. And I think that in those middle ranks there, when I was a lieutenant or commander, and maybe even a little bit into assistant chief, I think I wish I would have had a more mature, developed sense of understanding, like I mentioned earlier, second and third order effects.
Yeah.
I wish I would have had a little bit more clarity about, because I'm a type A personality who wants to get things done, who are not too risk averse. that the person that I'm working with may have opposite ideals, right? And that my attributes may be counter to theirs and cause them anxiety. And so I don't know if I'm making sense, but
I think you are.
I just think that realization that we can get to the same place when people are going to get there in different ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Navigation on Waze tells you different
Yeah.
than Google Maps.
Right. Yeah.
And the point is to get there safely.
You're right. Right.
So now as chief, I'm curious, you've got these folks who are in that middle layer now under you.
Right.
What's your input to them about their approach?
I am totally focused right now on them. So I think organizationally, middle managers are always forgotten, and so
I completely agree with you.
And so right now, my work is to try to bring those people up, develop those people, try to open their apertures more. You know, in my organization, as large as it is, middle managers are closer to, I think, organization. Well, I would say from a mindset, a mentality, they're closer to the line than they are to administration.
Yep.
And so I want to tell those folks and grow those folks in a way that let's understand that the experience I went through, there's several ways to get to where let's constantly improve. I'm going to tell you what my intent is. I'm going to tell you what the values are. Here's the purpose: protect the vulnerable from harm. Here's our mission: to proactively protect those that in our city, and to treat everyone we come in contact with professionalism, dignity, and respect. Go. Now we need to prompt them up and give them the ability to, whether it be to present in front of council, send them to more education or conference, but get them out of their roles. And I think that's my message to my assistant chiefs. Each of you have deputy chiefs. Each of those deputy chiefs have lieutenants. Each of those lieutenants have sergeants. And it's that sergeant, lieutenant, and deputy chief rank that always gets forgotten. Yeah. And just know where your North Star is, and keep saying the things that need to be said until people's ears bleed, and because then they'll know what's expected, right? Yeah. And so I think that.
You talked about North Star a few times. So what's yours?
It's doing right by people. Is my North Star. Protecting the vulnerable from harm. I say it again and again and again. I feel strongly that I was called to this profession. I never, people say, I knew very young that I wanted to be, I was kind of the anti-bully. I didn't like people bullying. I fought a lot in high school.
Yeah, so you would fight the bully.
Yeah, I was not afraid to fight the bully. And so I've always had a heart. I think I was called to this position to go first, to be second, to put myself in harm's way in the protection of others. And so that's my North Star. So when cops talk bad to people or they're not doing their job, sometimes being a police officer is a very dynamic job. It's one of those jobs, if you think about it, 12 hours in a car, out in the heat, I'm wearing a vest, I'm going from call to call to call, dealing with all kind of stuff that people are, and they're in the worst moments in their life.
Absolutely.
And it's an hour before you're to get off, and someone calls you about their kid don't want to go to school, or there's a cat in a tree, and it's just like, you're like, damn, lady, why did you call me? But you have to tell them. It may be your 15th call of the day. It may be your fourth 12-hour day in this week to work, and you're about ready to get your weekend off. But the way you interact in that encounter, in that one moment, it may be the first time that person's ever called the police.
Correct.
It may be the 1,000,000th time you've handled a call, but the way you act in that moment will inform that person's opinion about all of policing.
Right or wrong.
Right or wrong. All of police, not just in Irving or in Carrollton. It'd be anywhere in the country. And so in that moment, you have to make sure your North Star is to protect them from harm, to make sure that you're there for them. People tell us all the time when they come into the profession, I want to serve. I always challenge them. You could have been in clergy. You could have been a firefighter. Why serve? But they're really afraid to say those. I think with a higher understanding of their purpose will tell you, I want to run into danger when everybody's running out of danger, and I'm okay when I hear that. But their North Star is to help people, and that's both, right? That's the cops, because remember, one of the things we missed was, if we're not taking care of our cops, a resilient, mentally strong, well-adjusted person is going to serve better.
Absolutely.
Someone who is angry, upset, frustrated,
Yeah.
they're not going to serve. They're not going to serve. And so that's been, I think, back to that warrior. If I'm a warrior and I'm an occupying force and you're just the next call,
Right.
I'm not going to treat you well.
Right.
And so that's why the work has been a clear understanding of what you're supposed to be doing, what your purpose is.
And I love what you're doing with the Curve. I love the fact that you are an adjunct professor at UTA, that you're involved in so many other places to help spread the message and the word that our role is really back to Pelian principles as a guardian.
Absolutely.
And to protect those who are vulnerable and to serve people at the heart of what you do. And I would say for any leader, whether you are running a billions of dollar enterprise, whether you are the owner of the NFL team or the commissioner, at the end of the day, it's about the human beings, right? Until AI completely takes over and there's robots replacing us everywhere, it's still about the human. At least that's my view. So let's talk about timing, because sometimes this is something that can be a challenge when we're going into these new roles. You talked about the book that you referenced, and there's a book that I love, which is called The First 90 Days, and I reference that a lot when I'm doing leadership development work. I reference it even in my one-on-one coaching. And it talks about having a situational assessment, right? We've got to perform a situational assessment of what situation are we going into. So, for example, what the book would say, based on what you described, going from Carrollton to Irving as chief, you went into what's called a sustaining success situation. The car's already running at 200 miles an hour, and it's a well-oiled machine, if you will.
Right.
So timing, how much time do you give yourself when you're going into a new role to be proficient? Yeah, just start there. How much time do you give yourself?
That's okay. So the way I look at that is, at certain periods, at every level of my career, I feel this level of what I call it mastery, where things are it's
clicking.
It's clicking. And I can tell you, it's always been about 2 to 3, 4 years. But I'm going to tell you, chief, even coming into this new experience, I had been chief almost 5 years. And in the police chief world, that's a while, right? Police chiefs normally have about 2 to 3 years.
We just saw that in the city of Dallas with Garcia.
Yeah. And so. And so when I went, you jump in this car, and I've been there 2 years and a few months, and I'm just now getting my feet on the ground. The first couple of years is just, how's this place work? I've got a boss. I love my boss. I'm going to tell you, if you live in a city and you need a city manager who is making sure that we're doing what we say we're doing and we're stewards of our dollars, this is the guy. Chris Hillman will tell you that he does a review. He calls it a line-by-line budget review. And when I got there, I asked, does he really do a line-by-line budget review? And they're like, no, it's just the big stuff. Brother, when I tell you he does a line-by-line budget review, he does a line-by-line. And he want to ask you, this line went up 1.5%. Tell me why. And so,
he needs to be a finance guy. He needs to come into my old world. We used to call that the dental review.
Well, he does.
Where you go into every line for every cost, for every profit center and cost center. And you would go line by line, period over period, variance over variance.
That's him. And so I say that to say, that's a steep learning curve coming in, making sure you understand that, making sure that you're running, again, $91 million business that I've been blessed to lead, that I'm getting my feet on the ground, coming into a very dynamic county with respect to the criminal justice aspect of it, how we're managing our cases and our case load, and our call volume, our call load. We didn't hit on it, but as you well know, it's very, very, very hard to hire police officers right now.
Yes.
I'm fortunate. I'm at about 93% of my authorized strength, but that's still 27 police officers that I have vacant positions, and I'm in competition with every other police department.
Absolutely.
And so now that's driving us to do things like, how can we compete? Well, we're paying police. When I started this job, I think my first year was $27,000 we were making as police officers, and now the kids are walking in making 80 grand.
Is that right?
We're hiring lateral police officers and bringing them in over $100,000. And so I'm competing with every other city. And at the same time, how do you do that without putting your badge on the wrong chest? Making sure that this phenomenon of gypsy cops, where these police officers who have done something wrong and been let go or fired or walked away from a job, but then they present themselves in another department who desperately need police.
Absolutely.
And there's no greater example of this is what happened in Illinois, where the guy shot the woman who called them there to help her. This guy had been all over the place, and so it's very difficult. In what we're in.
We're talking about timing. We're talking about just timing. Yeah, about 2 years.
So and learning and just keeping that car on the road. And now I'm at the point when 2 years, and I'm really starting to look at this high performance vehicle and saying, oh man, where are we going to be in 3, 5, 7 years? Our facilities where they need to be. I've got 400 cops now, but our city and our density is growing, and the matrix that we're watching about the level of service that we want to maintain, like any other business, I'm going to need more cops.
Yeah.
And where am I going to find more cops in this distressed market of cops? And so that's where I was going is, making sure that we're just not putting people in these cars, right? And so I would think, so my goal for the next 3 to 5 years is to try to grow the police department whilst maintaining a high level of service that we have, and hopefully reach that level of mastery by then.
Well, it's not an easy task.
Right.
And I remember we would talk about that, in our board work together.
Yeah.
We would talk about hiring more women, for example, and attracting
Yeah.
more women in the profession, right?
Right.
I think the number was less than 20% or something overall, right? And then for chiefs, it's much less than that.
Yeah.
And how do you go after more diverse officers who represent their communities, seeing people who look like them and can relate to them? That's a challenge. And now you've got the point, or I should say the challenge of competing, right, with other agencies. That is a challenge. And so I think, the strategic plan and what you're thinking about, hopefully is not lowering the standard.
Right.
That's the other hard thing.
Yeah.
It's very easy for all of us, even in
Right.
business. People would get frustrated with me from time to time because they bring someone through the interview process and they'd be like, if you got other options, let's go with some other options.
Yeah.
Because there is a standard that we're trying to uphold.
Right.
And I'm guessing in your agency, there's a Chief Derick Miller standard for what you want to see.
Right.
Because as you talked about, one bad apple, one experience in the community could blow things up for your department in a way that you don't want that smoke.
Right. You don't.
Yeah. All right. So new opportunities. You've been blessed with a bunch of opportunities just at police agencies, but then also, you got the UTA, right? As an adjunct professor. You've got this curve thing. You've got board work, which we've done together, and others, right?
Yeah.
International Association of Chiefs of Police. How do you go about deciding whether to take on, say no to new opportunities as they come?
Man, that's been hard for me to do in the past because I always want to say yes. So I've come down to it. How can I make, where's the meaningful change? So anything that I do is about what's really, really motivating me right now is progress. I want to make, before I leave, I'll talk about legacy. There's a clip from Barack Obama, but talking about he likes people around him to just get things done. I want to be one of those guys that get things done. I'm looking at these opportunities now. The curve is an opportunity where we're saying to the profession, we've got to be better. Mm-hmm. We've got to change our culture. There's a deficit of education on the executive level, and so how can we change an entire profession? And how do you do that? Well, you know what? Let's do something that we've never done. Let's define what our purpose is, which we talked about ad nauseum, but let's look outside of our profession and our industry to see what's going on and how we can become better.
Yeah, which is probably not well received.
No, it's just like with Simon's work. There's others. What's Will's last name? Will Gadir, who's does stuff with. He's a restaurateur and he talks about hospitality. His work in hospitality would turn law enforcement chiefs' stomach if we talk about customer service. But that's exactly what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Is customer service, right?
Absolutely.
We're talking about treating people with professionalism, dignity, and respect.
Mm-hmm.
And so saying yes to meaningful change. The International Chiefs of Police was another opportunity that I didn't think I'd ever get. And now I'm in the ability. I'm at the table and can challenge my peers to how can we change our profession.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm saying yes to now. There's no secret. I'm at the end of my career. This is my 31st year. Hope to do it for a few more. I'm a young guy. I'm 54 still. I got a couple more years, make it to 35 years, and so I want to I want to change, because I think when I step away from this, I'm going to step away from it. I don't know what I'm going to, people say, what are you going to do when you retire? I'm like, I know I'm going to want to work. I don't know what I don't know what I'm suited to do, but so Roger Goodell, if you're listening,
shout out to Roger, Commissioner's office.
But yeah, I want to just meaningful change. Meaningful change is what drives me to say yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's so much I want to hit on. We've got just a little bit of time left. There's a few things I want to share with the listener that they may not know.
Okay.
One of them is that each law enforcement agency, at least in our state, more or less runs on its own authority.
Yeah.
A lot of freedom to set policy.
Right.
At the local level. Many people may not realize that. Just like a CEO at a company gets to set some policies, there's a board of director that's overseeing. Of course, you got your city manager, you got the elected officials. That's one thing. There was something else that you had talked about that I thought was relevant to your role, which is the number of stakeholders, right, which you have to interface with. And then I guess the topic that I wanted to maybe just end on was just the long-term vision for the profession. Together, when we worked and served on that board, we would spend some time thinking about, where this thing's going to go, right? Right now, we're in the 21st century, and what does it look like in the 22nd century, and that kind of thing. How will automation impact this profession? How will the shortage, if you will, of officers impact? How will ratios of houses to apartments, for example? We know that apartments tend to have more crime relative to a same jurisdiction, right? In terms of, land size, but if it's got houses as opposed to apartments, like how does that shift? So what are just some of the early things you're thinking about as relates to the future of policing?
Yeah, well, I think we're gonna have to embrace technology and leverage technology more than we've ever done before, because it is difficult to find police officers to do this job the way we see. We're going to have to police smarter. For example, AI right now in my industry is still frowned upon. People think that, I don't know if I can say it, ChatGPT or these other apps are more like word processing things. And I'm like, well, you still have to be able to, offer, you just can't say, write me a paper. You need to know how to do a lot of things, but it's going to have to, we're going to have to get smarter. For example, if a person's car got broken into and they called the police to their home, in the past when I was a police officer, I would have the luxury of calling out the crime scene unit to come take pictures and fingerprints, and then I would interface with the victim and would get information, and I would go write a paper report, and that paper report would, kind of how a bill becomes a law, right? It would go to the sergeant, it would go to the lieutenant, it would go to records, and then go to the detective.
And how much time are we talking?
And we're talking about weeks. Now, in the world of where I can order something from Amazon now, and I can see exactly when it was packaged, and I can see exactly when it was shipped, and where it's at. People want to know, where's my case? What's the status of my case? And I think we're going to have to get more technology. I imagine a day where an officer has a phone, a device, and now I'm going to take those pictures and that stuff on my phone. I'm gonna listen to what you tell me, and we're gonna talk it into AI. It's gonna generate the reports for me, and it's gonna dump into a case management system that the detectives are gonna pull. We're gonna automate each step of that way. We're gonna notify the victim about what's going on. We're gonna have to get there in an environment where resources are so finite in municipal government, where the cost of technology is going up. We're gonna have to figure out some way. We are embracing right now in Irving things like drones. We have a program now where we fly drones in tactical situations, but we're taking that to the next step. We're calling it drone as first responder, where maybe a call of an accident on the highway that would automatically call for 3 of the 4 police officers to be physically dispatched to the scene. Now I can fly a drone out to the scene and say, no, only 1 lane is blocked. We need 2 of those officers, keep the other 2 where they need to be. So things like that. We need to change the way the people were looking for to be police officers. In my day, SWAT, if you saw a recruiting video, you would see police officers rappelling out of helicopters. You would see car chases. Now we're looking for officers who want to be in neighborhoods and who can engage with the community, who can communicate. And so perhaps you'll notice that our recruiting materials are more human. They're more trying to humanize what we call humanize the badge, right? try to, because that's what kind of cops that we want.
Yeah.
And so changes like that, changes in leadership have to occur.
Yeah.
The biggest thing that has to happen in our profession of policing is our words have to absolutely be congruent with our deeds. I can talk all this stuff that I'm talking, but if it's not manifested in my cops, there's no trust.
Yeah.
And so
Got disconnect.
there's a disconnect. So I could go on and on and on about the things that need to be done. But
yeah. Well, there's lots to be done. That's the part that I would imagine would be motivating.
Mhm.
You know, you talked about being 31 years in, and sometimes, right, when we get that much time in, it's like, oh, I'm just looking back and wondering when's my time up.
Yeah.
But the reality is that there's a ton of opportunity in this profession.
Right.
And there are some innovators out there. There was a guy that I was working with in my last job out of Colorado, leveraging AI, for example, for dispatch.
Yeah.
And high quality information. As you know, speed matters.
Right.
You talked about earlier, could be the first time someone is interacting with law enforcement or the police or emergency services. That was me.
Yeah.
One time, my second child was being born, and I had to call 911.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew that was a number you call when you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So you call the number, and I had a great fireman who showed up, basically delivered the baby in partnership with us and my wife's friend at the time.
Right.
And things went smooth. Ended up coming to the hospital. That same fireman came to the hospital, just wanted to make sure everything was okay.
Yeah.
And everything was. But their response to me mattered.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that my barber for a number of years was also a fireman. So my respect for that profession, my respect for the policing profession, largely because of the work that I was doing at TI, and of course meeting guys like you, who I know that you get it, and you're on the right side of justice. You care about people, and you care about being there for your officers.
Right.
And I think that's sometimes a challenging thing to balance for people.
Yeah.
But I see you as what I call being a bona fide leader because of the approach that you take.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That means a lot.
So let's wrap up with this. Our listeners are in one of three spots. More than likely, most people listening in, they are either contemplating making a move. It's about that time.
Yeah.
They are fresh in the middle of a move right now. It's transition time. It's change time. And oh my God, the lights are bright. Or they've come out of that change and you know what? They're in a good place right now. There's no need for change. Maybe for you, for example, being in your role now 2.5 years. Okay, I'm in a place of steady state. Talk to the listeners, if you will. Just give them some last thoughts, some advice on how to think about approaching leaps, moves, uncharted territories.
So Simon Sinek, will tell you, when in the context of being asked to speak or being asked to do something, and sometimes we have this imposter syndrome. We have this idea of am I good enough? He would say that, you know what, if you're where you are, you've already been vetted. Like coming to this process, there would have been times where I'd have been studying, I'd have had notes, I'd have done all this stuff trying to prepare. But you have to have this level of confidence that you've already been vetted. I say you where you are because you put yourself there. I'm a man of faith, and I believe in divine intervention. But you're where you need to be. But if you have that urge or desire to that first group to move or take that next step, my advice is go for it. My advice is, one of the fears that I have is, when I'm done, am I going to look back and say, man, I knew I could have, if I'd have just put myself out there, I know I could have done that. So I would say go for it. To the group that's, and I have to take my own advice here, to the group at the end who are comfortable in it, I would say, don't get comfortable.
Yeah.
I would say to you that you are where you are, and don't get comfortable, man. Just if there's meaningful change that can occur, and you can make progress and make something better than it was when you found it, I say go for it. Yeah. I say do it. Don't sit at home. I see people who aren't minded like that doing those things, going for it, and then I think we have bad people. We have people in places where they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And so if you're out there and you're doing it, you're knocking it out of the park, and you still got that little go for it, man.
Yeah.
Because when you're done, I understand, and I've had it in some positions where you just you're done. And just go for it.
Now to that second group.
Yeah.
They're in the middle of it.
Have fun. Don't take it too serious. You know, you're almost at mastery. You're feeling good. You're in the middle of it. Things are going to come that just rock you to the core. And you're like, man, just realize, like right now, I think the temperament people, I can see them outside my office when who's going to go tell him? When something's happened, who's going to go tell him? And it's just like, it's not that you flip it about it. It's not, but you're prepared.
Yeah.
You're where you are. You're at that level of almost mastery. You're in it. You're doing it. My advice would be eyes wide open, making sure that you're understanding consequences, intentional or otherwise, that you're trying to always do right by people. And sometimes doing right by people, you have to make bad decisions. Sometimes, you know, I hate to say it, I fire people.
Sure.
I've had to
Me too.
cops. Yeah. You know, like, I don't like doing it. It can be stressful, but it's necessary. If your North Star is to help people, protect the vulnerable from harm, and all those things I talked about.
Sure.
And so that middle group, I would say, do your job, man. And you're making a difference.
Yeah.
And in all those groups, people are watching you. There's somebody at that step that you just came from that's watching you, man.
Yeah.
And they're watching, and so don't let them down.
I like that. You know, there was a study that was done. It blew my mind, the results of this study, that said that even the most introverted person will end up influencing, if they live to be 80 or so, will end up influencing as many as 10,000 people.
Oh, wow.
Even an introvert.
Yeah.
Over a life lived over a period of about 80 years will influence some 10,000 people.
Yeah.
So, newsflash, if you didn't know, people are watching.
People are watching you.
And of course, we know the higher we go, the more responsibility we get, the bigger the title.
Right.
Hopefully it doesn't change us on the inside.
Right.
Just recognize, though, that there's more eyes on us.
Absolutely.
And that actually takes me to my very last thing that I meant to ask you. How do you manage the stress and anxiety that comes from the big jobs that you've had and that you're in today?
You have to have faith. Like I said, I have this strong sense of I'm where I'm supposed to be. I feel like I've been called to this job. I feel like I'm where I need to be. And so is just making sure that foundation is strong. And then once you've got that, it gives you courage to do what you need to do. And then the balance of family is there. My wife is so supportive of what we're doing. She is a principal of an elementary school in Dallas, and so her job is more stressful than mine. And then realizing that just to do right by people, and the decisions may be tough and difficult, because I hear difficult stuff every day.
Yes.
Every hour.
People can't really even fathom or imagine it, but I get these morning reports of stuff that people have done to one another every single day, and just balancing that and just knowing that make sure that we're doing right by the victim. Let's make sure that we're not be able to solve that issue or happen to maybe some finality to whatever we're reading, but let's make sure we do right by the victim. And then I've got tough personnel decisions that need to be made, and again, it's just like, how do you balance that? It's just I guess I've been blessed in that. I'm not going to say it doesn't bother me. I don't take it home, but it's just trying to keep things in its perspective, in their proper place.
In their proper place.
Yeah.
With compassion I always try to make, if someone's alleged of doing something wrong, I don't go first to what they did wrong. Let's try to figure out everything they did right, and then to the point, okay, now this is where the breakdown was. And then let's diagnose and hope and deal with that. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
oh, it does. That's actually I think the way our justice system is supposed to work.
Right, exactly.
Regardless of our creed.
Yeah, exactly.
How much money we have in our bank account.
That's true.
Where we come from.
Yeah. But I think I've been blessed in that way, is just keeping things in their proper perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that, and I love the support that you got from your family. Again, our kids are about the same age. You know how busy they are, and I know that you are a very active dad. Yeah. I just salute you and your wife, both having roles where you're impacting people on a daily basis. Keep at that. I want to encourage you to do that. Again, I just really appreciate you coming on today, and I think our listeners are going to benefit from what you had to say.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Happy to be here. Thank you so much. I hope it was interesting.
I hope so. I think we'll get at least one listen.
I hope so.
All right. Thanks again.
Cool.
Thank you so much for listening. If you got value from this podcast, don't keep it a secret. subscribe, leave a rating or review, and share it with someone you know. Until next time, remember, our world is starving for bona fide leaders. Take your leadership to the next level by applying at least one thing you heard today.